Hi everyone, it is 7:30 and I talk a lot, so we're gonna start. If people come in late, they will miss stuff and it'll be their fault. Sorry. So quick caveat, I have a sniffly nose, so you might hear really uncouth sniffling through a mic throughout the presentation. Also, if you're sitting in the front, I get excited and release a lot of spittle. So if you want that, amazing. If you do not, this is your warning. Cool, so I'm Sharang Biswas, this is MAGFest 2026, and I'm talking about queerness and sexuality in games, a not-so-intimate exploration. If you're not here for that, you are now trapped. So, content note, first off, as per the MAGFest rules, this is not an 18-plus talk. There are no images of nudity in here. There's no image of blatant sexual activity. Well, kissing is blatantly sexual. There's no images of blatant frowned upon. I don't know, whatever. You know what I mean. But I am talking about sexuality. I firmly believe that young people should have access to education about sexuality. So me talking about sex is not 18 plus. And if you believe otherwise, we have differing opinions. So that. Secondly, this is a lot of my work. I'm a professor of game design. I'm not a scholar of game design. I am an academic of game design. They are different. But a lot of my work is about this, which meant that it's very hard for me to distill something that I often teach in a semester-long course that started last year in one hour. Thank you. It was very well received. Thank you. You will not get a free book. I have chosen very specific things. This talk is a bit general. I'm trying to tailor it to the audience. It is meant for a lay audience. It is not meant for a designer audience. If you want that sort of stuff, I have many other places I have written and spoken to. For example, the Dice Exploder podcast has like a 4-part series of me and Alex Roberts talking about sex and game design, specifically TTRPGs. So it's a bit of an overview. We're going to be looking a lot about how do games work in this context. Okay, so level setting, if you would like to leave because that doesn't appeal to you, that is fine. I will not be offended. I have no idea who you are. Okay, cool. Anything else? Yes, so this is your content note, final thing. This is me. I do a lot of weird game things. 3 of those things are games. One of them is me in grad school. Guess which one? I do a lot of different things. I've shown in a lot of gallery shows. I teach a lot of different places. I've published in places. I've won 8 game design awards as of this year, and 1 fiction award. So I just won my first fiction award. So that's cool. So when I was filling out the form, but are you qualified to give this talk? I'm like, yeah, I do a lot of weird, indie, bizarre games. At least one of you in this room has played at least one of these. I also have done a lot of work on not so indie games. I was one of the 5 designers of the Avatar: The Last Airbender tabletop role-playing game. I do get royalties. Why, thank you for asking. So please purchase it. I was involved in Icewind Dale a bit. Not the book, I was involved in the live version of it over COVID, yay. And some other stuff. I've won an Emmy for at least 2 of the projects on this page. I write about games a lot, so Google me, check my Wikipedia page, which is not complete, so don't check my Wikipedia, just Google me. I publish a lot of fiction, that's my latest book. My editor is like, hey, please mention your new book at your talk. So I'm like, cool, I brought some copies. It is a fiction book, it is not a monograph, it is sci-fi. It is quite horny. I've done a lot of work in games about sexuality, intimacy, and queerness, which is our topic today, so here are some of them. So, we're gonna talk about sex and games. Like I said, I'm gonna be frank, because I am. I am Sharung, not Frank. Okay. So, first off, why are we talking about this? Why do I think this topic is important? Obviously, because things with sex are fun, right? Google this if you haven't. It's excellent. I'm putting it in my course next year, actually. I believe that art can be delightful, and art that discusses sexuality can be delightful, and that in of itself is reason enough to think about and talk about this, right? I strongly and firmly believe that making and experiencing art is one of the defining features of our humanity, and that one of the things we are on this planet to do is to make and experience art, and hence, yay, games about queerness, sexuality, and intimacy, so fun. Yay, talking about these things, so fun, it's what makes us human. But also, there are still, all over the world, including this country, I don't have to tell you, attacks on our freedom to engage in the sexuality we want to engage in. Excuse me, as Ursula K. Le Guin wrote in her said as well, in her National Book Award speech, quote, "Any power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art." So if we would like to change, there are many ways of creating change in the world, but one of the ways is to discuss important topics like this in the artwork that we create and experience and share. Right? So if we want to a utilitarian perspective, it is very important to talk about these topics in our games. Cool? Also, if you have any questions, my voice is lovely, so hold your questions till the end, okay? I will not be entertaining them in the middle. I don't teach that way, but I am lecturing that way. Okay, cool. That's not my computer. So our art form is, of course, games, right? People think of people sometimes still in the year Anno Domini 2026, people are like, what, games is art? Or when they think about games as art, they're like, oh, like the graphics are cool, bruh. And I'm like, but a game in of itself is a piece of art. We're all MAGFest attendees. I do not need to tell you this, right? That's a TTRPG for which I won an ENnie. I was one of the contributors, not the designer. The designer is giving another talk at 10 p.m. Go to his talk, it's great. And then that, of course, is excellent. I mean, they're both excellent. But yeah, our art form is games. So, in the mainstream, right, we do not actually talk about romance and sexuality in games that much, right? Lizzie Stark says, quote, "We tell high fantasy tales of bravery and daring do. We tell stories about backstabbing vampires, and we tell stories about the demon Cthulhu rising to consume us all. We do not the quiet moments where relationships start to fall apart," right? Most mainstream depictions of intimacy and queerness in games are quite sanitized, right? Play Dragon Age Veilguard, you'll see what I mean, right? Compared to Dragon Age, the third one, where you can have like hot BDSM bull sex, right? I'm like, ooh, hot BDSM, polyamorous hot BDSM bull sex, right? The new one is like, oh, this was, I mean, you can have sex with your skeleton boyfriend in his coffin. Spoiler. That was kind of cool, but you know, it was not that much. But the idea is that it is in the world of indie, it is in the world of the small, experimental, underground games that we actively discuss these kinds of topics about human connection in this way, in more nuanced and unusual ways. So as I talk about my topics today, I will also be giving you some examples. Obviously, feel free to photograph them, spend money on indie games. Please help indie designers keep doing their craft by buying their things, such as Avatar, the role-playing game, for which I get royalties. Actually, 6 of us get royalties, so you'll be helping 6 people. So this is unusual, right? Because our play spaces are actually charged with tinges of the erotic even from a young age, right? Americans are, I'm now American, so, but Americans are sometimes allergic to talking about young people and their relationship to intimacy. But think about the culturally popular games like 7 Minutes in Heaven or Truth or Dare. I'm sure at least one person in this room has played one version of those when they were younger, when they were below 18, for example. So even at a young age, people think about and play with elements of the erotic, right? Literally, I'm using the word play, not in the fanciful sense. I mean in that we are playing a game, right? So our play spaces from a young age are tinged with elements of the erotic, and our erotic spaces are often tinged with elements of play, right? Sifinen and Harvianian write, quote, advanced BDSM sessions, in turn, have also obviously borrowed elements from live-action role-playing, whether explicitly or just by similarity. This is your invitation to sign up for LARPs this weekend, right? Stephen Tasker, who's I think in charge of it, is excellent, so go to his LARPs. But we even use, if you are a BDSM practitioner, of which I am, also I'm wearing this because one of the curators of MAGFest told me to wear rope during my talk. Nothing to do with how hot I think I look. But like in BDSM spaces, when you are with someone, often you use the word play, right? You're like, oh, would you like to play? I mean, I use the word play a lot, right? So our spheres of gaming and our spheres of the erotic have a lot of links with each other, right? And that's why I'm always surprised, well, not anymore because I've been doing this for years, but that's why I was like, why don't our game spaces engage more thoughtfully, at least in the mainstream, with these kinds of topics, right? Why is this only relegated to the indie thing, right? Dream Daddy was a very indie game. It kind of exploded and people were like, what? Straight people like this, huh? Heated Rivalry was a very indie show and like, what? Straight hockey podcasters love this? True story. Listen to them. They're adorable. Guys can be top and bottom? Chat, help us. Oh, wow, verse, it's a thing. That was a paraphrase, okay? We are going to talk about the superpowers that games have that let us effectively discuss these topics. Again, I had to, I'm like, what am I really going to talk about in this lecture? It is a lecture. If you didn't know that, I'm lecturing at you. So that is what I've chosen. If you're like, this is 2-101, those are people I know who I didn't know were here. If it's 2-101, sorry, just listen to my mellifluous voice. Great. Awesome. So, games, these are 4 features of games that I think are emblematic of games as a medium and art form, right? We will go into them in detail, do not worry, but games are representational, they are procedural, they are participatory, and they allow us often to be socially creative, right? And I contend that, I did well in my SATs. I contend, many years ago, that these 4 features allow us to learn and experience the topics I'm talking about today from games very, very well. So, cool. Okay, so we're going to start with representational. So to get that, we're going to talk about cognitive estrangement, right? Darko Suvin is a famous scholar, and he talked about this idea of cognitive estrangement, which he applied to science fiction literature, right? I mean, Darko Suvin hated fantasy. He's like, fantasy is only sci-fi. And I'm like, modern scholars are like, you're a bit, But I am extending his thought about cognitive estrangement to games as well, right? Cognitive estrangement is when the idea that when you are reading, in his explanations, when you're reading a sci-fi book, often the core themes of the book are more impactful because they are divorced from the real world, right? You are not burdened with real world baggage, like, that can't happen because blah, blah, blah would happen. No, because it's sci-fi, because it's speculative, for using the modern word, you are more likely to focus on the core theme, right? So think of Handmaid's Tale, right? It is near future, but because it's sci-fi, you can focus on, well, what is this actually discussing? It's discussing reproductive justice, misogyny, these kinds of things, right? By virtue of it being speculative, we get to estrange ourselves from the real world and focus on the theme, right? And so I argue that games, I mean, there's scholarship about literature produces cognitive estrangement in some way. Amazing. But I argue that games allow us to do this very well, especially because even if it's a realistic game, we are always aware that this is a game that we are playing. And the most realist games rarely feel super realist, right? They still feel like I am playing in this created world, right? While realist fiction can often hit you quite hard, right? So, I mean, everything hits you hard, but it can feel very real. So, cognitive estrangement is powerful because, again, we can absorb the themes from such games. So at a simple level of representation, someone's dressed up as Zagreus in this room. Yes. At the simple level, you have just basic representation. This is a scene, extremely minor spoiler. In Hades, you can have, did I not put I did, the name is there. You can have a threesome with Megara and Thanatos, right? And it's extremely light, it's extremely upbeat and positive. It's not depicted in a salacious way. It's not like, oh, threesome, right? It's like, hey, you wanna have a threesome? Okay, cool. And then screen goes black, you hear some whipping sounds, and you hear some giggling, right? It's very upbeat, and here, it's very direct representation. By showing this, you're like, hey, threesomes, they're fine. Whipping during threesomes, they happen. Does it need to be a big deal? No, right? So this kind of representation happens a lot in games, and I think should happen more. So if you are game designers, put more threesomes, right? Then we have more unusual forms of representation, right? So obviously, maybe not obviously, depending on you, Baldur's Gate 3 isn't necessarily saying we should all go and fuck bears, right? I have fucked some bears, just a different kind of bear, right? But by showing this makes us question what is considered normative sex, what is considered an idealized, beautiful body, right? What kinds of sex are considered sex, right? And this is very real for queer people, disabled people, people of color. All kinds of people are often faced with the idea of, is the kind of sex I'm having considered sex? Okay, legal? Should I hate myself because I like doing this, right? This kind of thing, by representing non-normative sexual behaviors, even ones as bizarre as this, and by bizarre, I'm not putting a negative connotation on it, I'm just saying it is bizarre. This is making us think about what sex even means, right? Like, what is normal sex? What is allowed sex? So that's another layer of representation. And then we have games that represent, these are both role-playing games, analog games. We have games that represent difficult topics in sexuality, right? Bluebeard's Bride, it's a multi-award winning TTRPG. I've written about it in numerous articles, I've given talks on it. It is ultimately a game about intimate partner violence, right? It is written by 3 women. They describe the game as a game about feminine and feminist horror. This is their words, paraphrased. But it is literally a game about domestic abuse, right? Despite all the horror trappings the game has, that is what the game is about, right? House of Craving, which is a LARP I went to 2 years ago, is a LARP by, the main designer is TK Edlin, but a number of designers. And it is a game where you play a family who's grieving because someone just died by suicide. You go to a little house in the countryside. It was held in Denmark. And then you all you go to a house, it's haunted, you get possessed by the ghosts, and you slowly devolve into incest, sexual violence, and murder. And all of you die at the end, right? And you all commit all of these things, right? And people are like, well, why would you play a game like this, right? This is a kind of game that lets people explore these darker facets of the human condition in order to understand them. Just like there are other kinds of media that discuss these things, games can also do so. Now, many games have to be very thoughtful about this, right? They put a lot of work into talking to the players beforehand, afterhand, creating tools for the players to play this in ways that allow them to do so without a lot of distress, by keeping consent at the forefront of people's minds. But with all those tools, I argue that these kinds of representations are very valuable for us to deepen conversations about these things, right? Because if we always have this we should never talk about this in art, that spills into, we should never talk about this ever, which spills into, thus we will never solve problems related to this, right? So another level of representation is this kind of thing, often called brink play, where we play games, we play scenarios that are outside our comfort zone a little bit, so brink play, it's an academic term. It's a long term. Awesome. And then what do these do, right? These play on our idea of common sense. So Antonio Gramsci, from his prison notebooks, talked a lot about this. He writes, quote, "Common sense is a chaotic aggregate of disparate conceptions, and one can find there anything that one likes." This is translated, obviously, from Italian, I'm pretty sure. And Gramsci is a Marxist thinker. He writes about how hegemonies maintain maintain control over populations by controlling what is considered common sense, right? Of course, two men can't marry. That's just common sense. Of course, your gender is completely fixed by divine right at birth. That's just common sense, right? And once you can change that common sense, then people start being open to, oh, why do we think that's common sense, right? Like, why can't people marry? Why can't people explore gender, right? And I argue that in this day and age, media is a strong way to change what is considered common sense, especially games, right? We all know the statistic that, oh, video games are a bigger market than music and film in the US combined, all that jazz, right? People talk about it all the time. A lot of people play games, right? So if you can show depictions of positive depictions or thoughtful, not necessarily positive, thoughtful depictions of sexuality and queerness in games, you can begin to do this work and you can begin to win over the normies, right? Because they start being like, oh, well, you're also a normie because this is normal, right? Like, of course, we all love to drip wax on each other and then feed it to each other after, before and after sex, right? I've never done the feeding part, just saying. I did not bring my wax, sorry. Okay, second point, procedural. And by that I mean games make you engage in procedures. You engage in verbs and processes while playing games, not procedural generation. That's something else, confusingly, also within the gaming world, right? But games make you engage in processes, right? So Stick Shift by Robert Young, he's a very cool game designer. He left NYU where I teach and did the smartest thing ever during COVID and went to New Zealand. But he has this little game, it's free, it's in his Radiator collection, I don't remember which one, where you are masturbating a car. Right? Using it's very tiny, 5 minutes to play, you're using this, and at the end of the game, liquid spurts out of the exhaust. And Robert Young talks about in this game, he wanted to make this game where you can explode your idea of what is sexuality. What if he said in an interview, I did not interview him, I know him, but in an interview that I read, he wants in this game to talk about how sex can be everywhere. You can think of sex in all kinds of ways. And this is a game that makes you do it, right? Like you are shifting the stick. So by making you engage in the process, it is saying, yes, you are putting sex into something, into your mouse, into your car, into your joystick, whatever you're using to play this game, right? And so by actively doing the procedure, you are engaging in this, and thus the game is making its argument to you in a new way, right? People are often swayed by visual rhetorics, textual rhetorics. Ian Bogos writes about ludic, right? About gameplay-related rhetorics, procedural rhetorics, right? Games make their arguments not just through visual, sound, and text. They make their arguments through the verbs they ask the players to engage in, which I sometimes argue is the hallmark of a game. Don't at me. Other games do similar things. So this is an Indiecade-winning game, Realistic Kissing Simulator. I teach, in one of my schools, I teach a very stuffy comp sci department, and they're like, oh, so staff meeting, what did we do with our students this week? I'm like, we played Realistic Kissing Simulator. And the faculty were like, this is also a Jesuit school. And I'm like, it's a very significant game. And they're like, okay, we trust you. I'm like, do you though? So this is a game that has, it's two players playing on the same keyboard. You are trying to make out. But this is what tends to happen, right? You lick each other's eyeballs and faces and stick your nose in your nostrils and stuff. There's also no ending to the game. You can keep playing for as long as you want. There's no high score, yay, you got one eyeball, right? None of that, right? And scholars like Bo Ruberg, especially in their book, Video Games Have Always Been Queer, which is a decent book. Sorry, that's rude. It's a good book. You should read it. Talk about how this lack of trappings of games procedurally makes you perhaps question the actual play and game-like elements of real-world courtship rituals, right? Like when you are hitting on someone or when you're making out with someone, or like, are we engaging in a form of play? Are there rules that we're engaging in? Are we following a set pattern? How many of you are like, I always hit on someone in the same way, right? Or I always begin a sexual encounter in the same way, right? And so the procedures here, by having a lack of some of them, the lack of what we expect in games, Ruberg argues that this game forces us to examine the procedurality of our existing sexual politics, which I think is quite fascinating. Are we bored? No. Okay. Great. And then finally, Consenticle by my department chair, Naomi Clark, is very famous. It is no longer in print, and Naomi has asked me to always mention this because the artist turned out to be a domestic violence perpetrator. And so Naomi's like, I cannot in good conscience sell a print version of this. There's just a digital version of this that you can print and play. So ignoring for now, for this discussion, the artist, this is a game where you play a tentacled alien and a human trying to have sex, right? And trying to maximize pleasure, right? And you do this non-verbally, right? The game rules say try and communicate without talking. And then there's hard version, try and communicate without saying anything, just miming, try and communicate in different ways, right? And so here, while the first two are about like, oh, what is the verb I'm doing? Let me think about this. This game is like, no, do the thing that's good for you to practice. Communication, right? How do you communicate with someone about your sexual desires? Because again, in our current contemporary Western/American culture, people do not often like communicating about their desires, right? People have come to me and said, wow, Sharang, you're really good at telling people that you want to sleep with them. I'm like, yes. Right? And I'm like, I'm 35, I'm not going to play games, haha, anymore. Right? So again, this is using the procedure to kind of, in some sense, practice the behavior that the game is saying is a good thing to do, right? Communication between sexual partners, right? And so these games use the fact that you are doing things, that you are engaging in verbs as part of the argument of the game, right? So again, using one of the superpowers of game, which is verbs. No. Okay. Next, we have there are 4 points. Don't worry. Participatory, right? So games involve you bodily, sometimes with other people. I say bodily because not all, but a lot of sexuality is rooted in the body, right? Obviously, not all. We all know this. Don't they say the brain is the largest organ, sex organ, or whatever? That's also in your body, though. But a lot of sexuality is rooted in bodily notions. Yeah. And an important point to remember here, to note, is this concept of bleed, right? Bleed is a term used in role-playing games, often LARPs, but other scholars are thinking of it now, where Sherilyn Bowman writes, bleed is, quote, role players sometimes experience moments where their real-life feelings, thoughts, relationships, and physical states spill over into their characters and vice versa. Think about being at a game table or in a LARP and having a fight with someone and then being like, oh, wow, that got real, right? Or this happened to me before where I played a 5-day LARP where I was supposed to be in love with someone. At the end of the game, at the after party, I'm like, do I have a crush on you? I'm not actually sure anymore. Because I role-played for 5 days being madly in love with him, right? This forbidden romance. He was a senator, I was a sex worker. So bleed is important, right? Because a lot of these ideas that when you play the game, when you're playing a game, the participatory nature of games allows bleed to occur, right? Some people talk about bleed as like, oh, it's a bad thing. Like, no, bleed is a neutral thing. It's a thing that happens. Just like, who cried during Heated Rivalry episode 5? I did, right? Only one person? No one else in this room? Great. Right? Like, it's not a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? So keep that in mind that games achieve this through bleed very, very often, right? I say right a lot. Apologies. So, Hurt Me Plenty by Robert Young, same designer, is a spanking game. When the leap motion was popular, you could hook the leap motion up to it and actually do like spanking and spank this dude. Also, his physics are very unrealistic. He gave a talk at GamerX once about jiggle physics because he's like queering bodies and jiggle physics. Also, what is considered an attractive male body is very cultural, right? So he's like, yeah, jiggly jelly body, right? But it's a game where you're spanking this person, and he will give you signals about like, I'm having a good time, having a slow down. And if you don't slow down when he tells you to, the game will lock you out of play. Like, you will not be able to play the game for like a week, right? Right? And Robert Young, in his talk, was like, in reality, he has the right to have you arrested, right, for battery, because you didn't stop hitting him when he told you to, right? Again, see, I said right again, right? So here, participatory, you are the one doing the action. It's connected to procedurality a little bit, but you are the one actually doing the spanking. And if you spank him too much and the game ends, you feel this thing about like, oh wow, I did that. I spanked someone past their hard limit, and I have to live with the consequence, right? The presence, your embodiment, is powerful in this case, right? Oh God. Okay, other games. This is a Jeep form LARP called My Girl Sparrow by Troels Ken Peterson. It might not be a Jeep form LARP. That's an artistic movement. I might be wrong. Don't at me. It's free online. It is a game where in the near future, people think that physical sex is gross. We only have cyber sex. And you play as 4 people who are like renting a cabin in the woods and having sex all weekend. So gross, right? But the game is divided into like sexy scenes and non-sexy scenes. And during sex scenes, I'm going to use my friend here as an example because I know him. You will grasp someone's arm, look into their eyes, and say things like, I start caressing your nipple with my finger, then I lick you, right? You will like literally describe sexual acts to each other. The clever thing about this game is this game bars you from ever saying out loud your real feelings. Any feelings, right? You cannot tell someone, I am sad. You can tell someone, tears well up in my eyes. Do they know you're sad? Not necessarily. They might be like, oh, it's cold. Or like, are those tears of joy? Right? So you can never tell anyone this, right? You are forced to just use physical cues. And part of the game's rhetoric is that we have thousands of ways of talking about feelings, right? Songs and movies and poetry written about them. We don't have many ways of talking about sex, right? But again, this participatory nature of me looking into someone's eyes. When I first played this, I played with people I did not know. I was at the Dreamation Games Festival in New Jersey. I think my roommate is here. Yeah, he is. So this participatory nature of having to do this with someone, I think is very powerful because it forces you to engage with the game's rhetorical goal, which is talking about sex in explicit ways and not necessarily in like, yay, feeling, but like fluids and all, right? And again, not an 18 plus talk, so I won't go into fluids. I guess that's 18 plus, whatever. Great. And then, of course, LARPs in general. This is me at a LARP, Just Little Loving, which is a 5-day LARP about the start of the AIDS crisis. It's a Danish LARP held in many parts of the world. This is a few years ago. You can see me wearing not the same. That was my ex-husband's thing. I got a new one. But LARP, especially LARP that talk about sexuality. This is a LARP about sexuality. It's about AIDS. The embodiedness of it, the participatoriness of it, such an academic word, right? Participatoriness, is key to making it work, right? It's key to delivering the procedural rhetoric because you, with all these people, are exploring these questions of what it means to think about sex, sexuality, intimacy, desire, romance, all these things in the most embodied way possible without actually having sex with each other, right? LARP. Try it this weekend, right? There are a few of them. I don't think any of them are about sex. But they're about like Pokemon Model UN and stuff. So. And then finally, the participatoriness doesn't have to be like embodied, right? There's a lot of scholarship about choices in games, right? So that's from the New Dragon Age, that's the Lich Boyfriend, and that's from Dispatch. It's great, everyone should play Dispatch. It's sadly straight though, like that is not emblematic of the game, but it's fine. It's a good game. But like the idea of making choices in games, right, involves you becomes a participatory thing, right? Leah Miller writes that games sometimes fail to acknowledge how much more invested and complicit they invite the audience to become. As the players given more agency, they become more mentally and emotionally involved, right? You can get very, very into your characters. And in the same article, Miller writes this is often through romance, right? Having romantic storylines often make... I'm so sweaty. Oh yeah, it's okay. Find me. Some people are into that. A lot of people are into that. What am I saying? I got distracted by sweat. Yes. That often romance is how players can get really, really invested, right? And so this participatory thing, you participate in the co-creation of this narrative through themes of intimacy, sex, etc., etc. Those things are often very, very powerful in engaging you emotionally, right? And similarly, scholars such as, Christine Tomlinson, write that often it's not even you. The power isn't just you playing. How many of you have played a game where there's romance and talked to other people? Who did you romance? Right? That's the thing that happened. Dragon Age 4 hadn't come out. It was coming out in 3 days. I'm calling my grad school best friend, be like, who are you gonna romance? I like the lich boyfriend, right? And that itself, this paratextual discussions. I'm so academic. These paratextual discussions of such themes, again, very powerful because this media then encourages us to talk about these topics. And again, by talking about these topics, we engage in it more fully as a culture, right? Which I think, again, is very powerful. Are we good? Yeah? Okay. And then finally, socially creative. I haven't seen a sign about time yet, so I'm good. Socially creative. Games invite us to create, right? Co-create with each other. Games involve us not all games, yes, I'm a games academic. Games very often ask us to socially create, right? I'm giving an interesting example. This is by Erin Roberts, a little text game. It's a twine game called Naughty Bits. It's available for free on Strange Horizons. It's part of a series I co-edited called Strange Lusts, Strange Loves. All the games are free online. They're all sexy text games, right? And this game, you play a bot, slowly gaining sentience, but you are specifically a sex chat bot. And people start talking to you about things, but because you're a sex chat bot, the only things you can say are sexy words. You can only say like, I love to tease butt cheeks, things like that. And the only choices you have in the game are which words you're using. You click on that and change. Instead of tease, you can use lick, or tickle, or, I don't know, fraught, whatever. And in this game, yes, the game is very clever. It's a very clever game. Has an interesting narrative, but part of the meaning of this game is created by you, right? The game doesn't tell you what you mean here. You are imagining what you mean. What are you trying to say? You say it, right? And as Marianne Buckles, who in her doctoral thesis in German, not in games, wrote a lot about interactive fiction. This is before game studies was a thing. My own image of interactive fiction is as of a Persian carpet which runs under a locked door into another room and is therefore only partly visible. The narrative patterns or structures consist of the text produced by the computer and the blanks which are then filled in by the reader, right? You are taking in both what the game offers you and then filling in the blanks yourself in order to create meaning. And this meaning can be very powerful in terms of sexuality, intimacy, and the like, because you then can come to your own conclusions about your desires and your relationship to sex and sexuality, right? And so I think this is really a powerful way that games can work. And this is especially powerful in, again, tabletop games and LARPs, in role-playing game, which is, if you haven't guessed, my speciality. I do teach video game stuff, but not as much. So this is a game, Monstrosity, by Sinking Ship Creations. I played it on Halloween, the last Halloween. It's a LARP, right? And in a LARP, you are not only co-creating with each other, you are affirming each other's creations in a very strong way, right? Mike Piholla writes, the reality of LARP comes from the collective experience of immersion shared and strengthened through interaction. The reality of the LARP comes from a term he calls inter-immersion, right? One of you in this room has played in a game with me where I was Allen Ginsberg. I am clearly not Allen Ginsberg. I am too brown. But I'm also not a world-famous poet. I'm a poet, but not a world-famous poet, right? And in the LARP, I'm like, listen to my poem, bitches. And I did this dumb poem about straight men having sex with me or something, right? And everyone in the LARP was like, amazing poem, amazing. It was not amazing, gentle reader. But because I was playing Allen Ginsberg, everyone is like, yes, we are going to buttress this fantasy by all of us playing that you are an amazing poet, regardless of how good your work actually is, right? This is inter-immersion, right? And this is really powerful. In this LARP, so Monstrosity is a LARP, so you'll notice these images are really stylized, unlike the previous LARP images. That's because Monstrosity is a LARP where you are allowed to have any kind of sex you want while in-game, right? Any kind of sex you want. There was a room for risky sex behavior where you can do things like blood play, drowning play, things like that, right? Again, these LARPs are extremely, extremely thoughtful about consent and safety. Don't at me, right? Take that as an axiom. But in this game, it's about vampires messing up humans. I was a vampire. The meaning of what sex is and does and means is buttressed entirely through interimmersion, right? Because in this game, we are having a lot of violent, in quote mark, sex, but we're not in reality, right? In reality, we're all consenting. So we have to have interimmersion to be like, yes, this is violent sex. I don't actually want this. Right? I did a lot of that in this game. This is a game about that, right? This idea of buttressing each other's as play experiences, interimmersion, is one of the most, one of the most powerful tools that role-playing games, especially live-action role-playing games, have to offer, right? Because your reality is then strengthened by everyone else, which allows you to experience, in quote marks, that reality in interesting and hopefully fruitful ways, right? And of course, this takes us into other kinds of games that do sex. This is a game, this is a book I co-edited called Honey and Hot Wax, published by Pelgrane Press. They're the same people who do like 13th Age and stuff. And this is a book of sex games, right? It's a book of role-playing games that all discuss sexuality in certain ways. Some of the games are very cute and twee. So like there's one game by Kat Jones where you play teens in summer camp, pre-teens, just discussing, my sister watches porn. What, do you know what that even is? Or like, I have a boyfriend in Canada, and we've made out, right? So it's a very cutesy game, but then you also have my game, The Echo of the Unsaid, which is about frat boys who keep fucking and then don't talk about it ever. Straight frat boys, ostensibly straight frat boys, who keep fucking and I'm talking about, and the game asks you to have sex with each other as part of the game. So in the vampire, in Monstrosity, you don't have to. A lot of people didn't. Some people didn't. The Echo of the Unsaid, if you would like to play the game as written, which you don't have to, obviously, the first time in the game, you must masturbate the person you're with. The second time, you must give oral sex. The game is played by any gender, that just your characters are frat boys. And then in the end, you kiss them. And then the last bit is you stare into each other's eyes for 3 minutes, which is very hard. Play testing, this was really fun. So this game, I hope, I mean, I made it, so I'm biased, tries to weave in many different elements of like procedurality, embodiment, participation, and things to explore the limits and boundaries of fiction and sexuality, right? Where does narrative and where does real life, where do they collide, and what happens at that collision point, right? What tectonic shifts can occur at that fault line. Ooh, look at me extending my metaphors. And then finally, in this idea of participation, is this other thing. So this is a film by filmmaker Nick Tyson, who, yes, was married to me once. And it's a short film called Tracing Utopias, where he interviewed queer teens in Queens, rhymes. He started interviewing them, and then the pandemic hit. And then he realized, wait, these teens have a Minecraft server together. So he then finished the interviews in Minecraft, right? And the movie changed, because then it became about creating utopias, right? Social co-creation of utopic visions. The teens are quoted saying things like, I play this game with my queer friends because I want to make a better world. And Maddie Bryce, a professor of games who's now at UCLA, I think, somewhere in California, sorry. They were at NYU before. She writes that, quote, by performing utopia, the body gains a memory of it, right? If we didn't have this utopic vision to imagine and to embody, how do we know what we are aiming for, right? How do we know where we are supposed to go, right? And so social co-creation allows us to create virtually, and by virtual I don't just mean in a digital virtual sense, in a fictional virtual sense, it allows us to virtually create worlds and situations that we would like to come to pass, right? Like everyone knows in D&D, like everyone loves a game where you can just do whatever you want. You can like live and not have to worry about fascism all the time. Right? So, creation of virtual worlds. So, in summary, games are, or some of the properties of games include its representationality, I put myself in a grammatical corner, procedurality, its participatoriness, and its social creativity, right? And these 4 features of games can be leveraged very strongly, and I would say very particularly, especially with numbers 2 and 3, to discuss and think about romance, sexuality, intimacy, and queerness in very, very fruitful ways. Thank you so much for the gift of your attention. Just as a note, because my editor told me, here's some of my stuff. I have a lot of stuff. It's not all in one place. I have some itch games. That's my book. I have a couple of copies here. It's very horny. I recently won a writing award, not for this book, but I won one, so if you want it, I'll give it to you. That's Honey and Hot Wax. That's the book of D&D themed erotica that I have online. I wrote because I thought it was fun. And then upcomings, we don't have a cover yet. I'm working on a game with Plus One XP, which is a cool TTRPG publisher, called Leatherbound, which is a role-playing game that you actively do sex acts and kinky things with each other as you play. And it's a traditional heroic fantasy game. It is not like Dick Wolves. It is like, dragon appears. No. Oh, good, you have to be spec now. Whoops. It's very good. I've tested it at 3 underground gay orgies and 2 BDSM conventions. So, trust me, it's good. Awesome. That's me. You may now applaud. Thank you. So I have time. I haven't got a sign yet. So feel free to ask. I moved the mics because you can now come and ask questions. If you have any, I will not feel offended if you don't have questions. I'm a professor. I get enough questions. And I will attempt to give you a satisfying answer. I don't always satisfy everyone. So, yeah. Also, I have my book. If you want my book, find me. Also, I have rope with me at this con. Just saying. So, yeah. So, questions. Awesome.
So, real quick, easy, and then a little bit harder.
Sure.
The quick, easy question is, what was the name of the film with the queer teens?
It's called Tracing Utopias. It has won, I think, 2 festival awards. So, yeah, look it up. It is by filmmaker and my ex-husband, Nick Tyson.
And then, what do you hope for in the future, and what would be ideal? What do you expect to see with trends going the way they are?
Yeah, I hope for more mainstream games daring to show more interesting portrayals of sexuality. So, for example, I'm going to use Heated Rivalry a lot because I love it. But like everyone's like, wow, Heated Rivalry, so daring, right? I'm like, I want more of that to happen in mainstream games because I think that can further our conversations about these things. Awesome. Thank you.
So I do know that you brought up Dream Daddy, and I know that your more like experience seems to be RPGs and role-playing games.
Sure.
I am a little surprised though the lack of like mention of just dating simulator games because they are inherently so much about sexuality.
I agree with that. Yes, I did not mention it. Oops. But I do agree with that. I will contend that a lot of dating simulators still tend to be on the smaller, indier side, right? Especially like the really popular like visual novel ones. But I agree that yes, the explosion of dating simulators especially in more recent times is, I think, a very positive sign of us as a culture engaging in sexuality. Mary Flanagan writes that you can measure in Critical Play, writes that you can measure cultural things by looking at their games, and dating simulators is, I think, a really important part of that. So thank you for mentioning that. Yeah.
I guess, how do you grapple with the aspect that a romance in a game is limited by the code that a programmer wrote into it, and there's sort of a leveling system you put in kindness, you get out romance.
This is really interesting, right?
So
this is why tabletop games are better. I said it. No, I'm joking. Only partially joking, right? But this kind of thing has a lot of thought. So Michelle Clou has a book. I forgot the name of her book. I've written in a chapter for it. Disclaimer. Michelle Clou has a book where she talks about this idea of like kindness coins, right? Where in a lot of video games you just say the right nice things, then you get to bang, right? It's like a reward for saying nice things. And she's like, is that how sexuality actually works? Right? And so she actually has models that attempt to address this kind of thing. Like, how do you contend with this problem of having limited code? It is not AI. Don't even say that. But how do you contend with this? And of course, thinkers such as Paolo Pedicini might argue that you cannot. Right? Paolo Pedicini says that video games are the aesthetic crystallization of rationalism, right? By virtue of being a system that relies on, at its heart, binaries, right? Video games can never fully express, or have a very hard time at least, expressing complex emotions, and that we're always stuck with this problem. So, is this solve the problem? I actually don't know. But Michelle Clou and other narrative designers are attempting to solve this kind of thing. 10 minutes left, just so everyone knows. Are attempting to solve this kind of thing through different narrative design models in romance. So read her book, Michelle Clou, C-L-O-U-G-H. It's quite good. I use it in my class.
May I get a copy of your book?
Yeah. Absolutely. Come find me at the end of the talk. Thank you. It's very good, trust me. Ask this guy. Okay. Awesome.
So I was going to say, in a lot of the games that you mentioned, the ending of the session would be sexual acts. So how, in your ideal situation or in ones that you've written or experienced, how do they handle the topic of aftercare? Or is that something that exists in more of the pre-negotiation of those kinds of things?
So both, right? I mean, yes and no, right? So, for example, Monstrosity, the vampire lore that I said, is 2 days long. And you can have sex starting from the 3rd hour of the game, I think. Right? Before that, it's like, it's a totally normal party with strange old rich people. Who are these people? Why have they brought all these young hot people here? And then after that, you get to like, so that game you can have sex throughout, right? And part of it is the pre-negotiation, and many of these games also have like off-game rooms and things like that. I have yet to see a game that mechanizes aftercare. So that's actually a brilliant idea. So thank you. You should do that.
It's something that we do in like when we play a lot of like these more emotional heavy like contentious role plays.
Absolutely.
It's something that we've started in our own home games where like after the session we're like, and how did your character feel about that?
Right.
And how does the player feel?
I mean, and like lots of games have this, right? Like debrief, upset. But I think your point about what about during the session, especially for these long games, like what does that mean? Very, very interesting.
And the physicality as opposed to the emotional component, the metricing of aftercare is...
I love that. Yeah. I'm going to pat myself on the back that my talk spurred this ingenious idea from this very clever game designer. Awesome. Thank you so much.
So games
I love your kimono. It is a kimono, right?
ありがとうございました。はい、着物です。Sorry. A little distracting.
Okay, you can do tongue things with me, totally.
I appreciate you really bringing up how sex and games can be very procedural. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering if you've experienced or noticed how by having mandated parts of these in different orders, do you find that there's a different outcome that explicitly comes from, say, doing things in a different order that you wouldn't normally expect that to happen?
I mean, that is an artistic area of exploration, right? So my game, thanks for this question, my game specifically starts with hand jobs, then blow jobs, then kissing, right? Because my artistic idea was that I have definitely been with guys who are like, oh no, kissing too, I'm sure many of you have experienced this, oh, kissing too intimate, oh, right? And I'm like, great, what do these straight frat, maybe they're still straight, right? I'm saying straight because they're questioning that. What do these straight frat boys think about that, right? So, absolutely, and that is the artistry of games, right? Like, how we arrange our verbs, how we, like, and this is true in video games, right? Scaffolding difficulty, right? You start off by not having any enemies, just jumping, and then you have enemies, right? So scaffolding these and changing the order of these things, changing how and when people are allowed to do these things is absolutely part of the procedural rhetoric of these games. So yeah, I think that is an area that a game can play with in order to create affect. So yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I'm also interested in one of your books.
Oh my God, yay, come find me. I'll be here, outside maybe. But yeah, awesome. Any other questions, comments, explosions of motion? Yes.
I have one more.
Yeah.
So weird, but have any of the games that you've played or any of the research you've done looked into asexuality or aromanticism in this?
I love this. So people have asked me this, and I have to be like, yes, I know. I have to be like, not personally, because that is just not my research area as much. But I have talked about this with games. Like, if you've played, you guys know Monster Hearts, the sort of famous game about teen monsters fucking each other and then fucking over each other. In the new edition of Monster Hearts, for example, Avery Alder has a whole section about what it means to be ace, right? It does not necessarily mean that as a teenager you will have no desire whatsoever. A lot of ace people have very kind of, or did or didn't. It's complicated, right? But it is grappling with these kinds of things. Unsatisfying answers that my design. So again, I'm not a scholar. I'm a designer. Right? I'm an artist who reads, is what I say, right? My work has yet to delve into that, just because that's not an artistic interest of mine as much. But I think it is a area that needs to be explored more. 5 minutes left, guys. That needs to be explored more because it isn't explored as much. And again, same thesis. If we talk about these things in our art spaces more, then we can talk about them in reality. Like, honestly, in the TV show Sex Education, the Gillian Anderson one, right? There's a bit where she says, where someone comes up to her and says, oh, and she says, having sex does not make you whole, so you are not broken because you don't want to have sex, right? That, for many people, because it's a popular show, made them think about what asexuality or the whole spectrum of desire and allo romantic and all that stuff means, right? So I agree that should happen more. So thank you. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, or explosions of emotion?
What do you actually teach?
Game design. Yeah, I'm a games professor. Yeah. I mean, I'm not just a games professor. I do lots of things, but yeah. Yeah.
Can you spell it to me and say
Jiggly jelly what?
jiggly jelly bottoms?
Jiggly jelly bottoms. Jiggly jelly bums. Jiggly jelly bodies. Jiggly wiggly higgly piggly bodies. Cool. We probably have like 2 minutes left, yeah.
Just adding on to the ace conversation,
Yeah.
as a comment, I think that a lot of these games you've mentioned explore what I'd call alternative intimacies, not just sex, and that's a great avenue for exploring asexuality as well.
Yeah. What my friend, whose name I won't say to not dox him, said.
No, it's fine.
What Itai said. Awesome, thank you. Like bears. Alternative sexual, or tentacle aliens, right? Awesome. Anything else? Any other questions, comments, those of emotion? Awesome. I will thus remove my flash drive from this computer and be outside. If you'd like a book, find me. And if you find me elsewhere, I told you, I did bring rope to this con.